Jesus' name, amen. This is part 2, if you will, of the life of Samson, one of the most misunderstood, I think, characters of Scripture. I think we put him into a cartoon kind of place in our minds and in our understanding. Our theology is a little bit twisted, I think, when it comes to him, and it's good, I think, for us to just get some moorings about maybe who he is a little bit clearer. That certainly isn't the point of this. It's not just about information, because truly all of his life story is an amazing, a perfect picture, an illustration of the church and how we should be behaving. I've subtitled the life of Samson, just the weakness of his strength, because truly that is what his problem was. In the midst of his physical strength, which was a metaphor, if you will, a demonstration of spiritual strength, he had a weakness. There was a thread that ran throughout him that was constantly holding him back. That is the thread that we're constantly hammering at through this series, because it is the thing that keeps us weak. It is the thing that keeps us not to know the strength of God in our own lives and in our own ministries and in our own church. Just a quick reminder of a bit of history. We dealt with this the last time we were together, but for those of you who weren't here, or just to catch you up, the book of Judges is where we're into with the life of Samuel, starting in chapter 13. He gets more paperwork, and whatever the word is, more pages, more chapters on Samson than any other figure in the book of Judges. The book of Judges deals with that time of history after the death of Joshua. They've been led into the promised land, and they began to take that land, and Joshua passes away, but they have no king yet. Twice in the book of Judges, if you know the book, the theme of the book is very clear. There was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in his own eyes. And if that is not a description of the age we live in, I don't know what would be. There is a time of the judges that takes place, and this is just a reminder. And a judge is somebody who physically dispenses God's judgment and his punishment on wrongdoers. This is done, generally speaking, in a military way, in a political way. They didn't have a king, but as God's people began to wander from the Lord, he would send punishment on them. I showed you this last time as well. Again, just for means of a bit of review. The pattern that we see throughout the book of Judges is an up and down pattern. That Israel, because they don't have a king and everyone's doing what's right in their own eyes, their hearts begin to wander, and as a nation, they begin to put God aside. And they begin to take him not so seriously. And this is obviously a very clear picture of how you and I can find our own lives to be. That we start to get cold, dreary, start to take God not so quite so seriously, start to dabble with sin or things in our lives that shouldn't be there, and we begin to find ourselves feeling a little bit cold. Israel reaches rock bottom. They realize that there's a problem. God, in fact, sends in another nation into the nation of Israel to cause them grief and to cause them trouble. And they say, what's going on? Why are we having all these troubles? And why can't we have just peaceful lives? Why is all this happening? And it dawns on them, it's because of us. Because we entered into a covenant with God, and if we'd walk with him, he'd walk with us, and we're not walking with him. So he is chastising us, and they cry out to God, and God sends them a deliverer known as a judge. That judge leads them in a military plight, a military concourse, and they go out and they find victory over their enemy. They drive them out. And Israel now comes to a place of great victory. And they live high on the top, and they are the top of the game. Everybody in all the nations are afraid of them. And everybody looks to them for wisdom, and everybody looks to them for direction. Can I just say that this pattern that we see of this up and down, they go back down, and then they reach the bottom again, and then they come back up. This is the very same pattern that we can recognize in the church in modern age, in the New Testament church. Spiritually speaking, this is how the church has functioned. That there have been times when the church is on the cutting edge of the culture. By the way, I don't know if you realize this, but we're not there now. Okay, just a heads up. There are times when the church is on the cutting edge of the culture. The church is the one who, not because of their domineerance, not because they go with the sword, but because God is with them. And people recognize, and this is so foreign to our Canadian ears, that you almost think I'm making some of this stuff up. But there has actually been times in history where the church has been on held in such high esteem that people were fearful of speaking against her. People were coming into the church out of curiosity of, what is this thing that you people hold? There was a time, for example, I'm told, in history where if there was a parade in a town, the first people in the parade, the first person in the parade would be the pastor of the church, would be at the leading the parade. Would that ever even enter anybody's head in our culture that when we're about to have a parade, you better go get the pastor because that's who should start the parade? That's the way that they saw the church to be, the leader of the community. Of course, in a Canadian context, that would mean and require that not only we have one pastor, but we have everybody. Oh, wait, we're missing a Muslim. Let's get it. Wait, we don't have a Baha'i guy. We got to find, and we'd have to get everybody into the car, and then the car would drive through, and everybody would be going, what are those people up to? What's that about? No clue. Zero. That's how far away we are from anything like that, and that's just one simple thing. But cultures have been literally changed because the church has known an immense move of the Spirit of God. There have been times past, and I'm not making this up, in Wales, for example, that the church had such a high wave and such a presence of God about them that the police department, for about 3 to 5 years, had nothing to do in the area where God was moving. And they actually got bored with themselves, because the crime rate had dropped and plummeted so low. Saloons were closing. Betting places were closing. This was not the church coming and saying to these people, you've got to stop this. This was because God had moved so mightily upon God's people that the culture itself began to change. Police department that had nothing to do, they actually decided to come to church to find out what was going on. Many of them got saved, and they started forming quartets. And if you wanted to call the police, you were only phoning them to make an appointment for them to come to your church this Sunday to sing. That's what they did. I am not making that up. There have been times in history where the church has been on the top of the cutting edge. She has known power from God. She has known the authority of opening the Word of God, and people have been slain, not slain in the Spirit, people, but just slain by the Spirit in terms of conviction, in terms of recognizing their own undoing before a holy God. There have been times when the church has known such authority and power. The culture has changed because of it. Can I just tell you something? When the church has realized that she's come down to the bottom and that's not the case, she has always cried out to God. Do you know that this is the first time in church history that I'm aware of, and I'm not a historian, the first time in church history that I'm aware of that the church has been sliding and sliding and sliding and sliding and never come to the realization that, wait a minute, we're not winning anymore. We've actually come to be actually saying to ourselves, no, I've got this. No, I know the world is encroaching on us. I know our kids are being snatched away. I know we're struggling to get a Sunday school guy. I get that. I know the youth are wandering. I know, but we've got this. No, we're just going to have we just need a better pastor. That's what we need. No, I got this. It's okay. We're going to start a new program. And we're always thinking we've got this sorted out and we can handle this, and we have never reached the bottom. And the church in the age we live in, and I don't mean the churches and the people I'm speaking to, I mean the church North American-wide universally, although universally is not the case because there's parts of the world that they are on the top of the culture. But the church, by and large, English-speaking North American church for sure, has never come to that place of realizing, do you know what? This isn't the way it's supposed to be. This isn't the way it has to be. And we have never come to a desperation where we're ready to cry out to God for help. That's just my humble opinion that you get free of charge and comes to you now. You can do it with what you will, but that is the case. And this is really why we're talking about the book of Judges. It is so in keeping with who we are and where we are. Every time in the book of Judges, there is a military conquest that happens. God sends in a leader for them to deliver them because they cry out for help. But this time in Samson's life is entirely unlike anything that's happened before. Because this is not, for one reason, this is not a military takeover. This is not one nation marching into another land and setting up camp and saying, all right, this is ours. You put up or shut up. This is them coming in slowly, little by little, eking in, making their way, and Israel letting it happen, doing nothing about it. If that isn't a picture of the church today, I don't know what is. That the Philistines, if you were metaphorically, have begun to infiltrate our minds, our homes. We flip on the TV, we listen to what they listen to, we go to the movies they watch, we do everything they do, and we are just walking around like we're just a part of the crowd. And heaven forbid we should open our mouths or say something offensive. They're ruling over us. And we would never dare to raise our heads or say maybe we should separate ourselves from the Philistines. We wouldn't want to cause any trouble. It's exactly what Israel was doing. Just keep the status quo. Just everybody be happy. Let's just get along and hold each other's hands and sing kumbaya and have no troubles at all. This was not a military takeover. Israel had become so uncomfortable and accepted the status quo and just made sure everything was easy and no trouble was made. Israel was not calling on God for a deliverer. Boy, if that isn't us, I don't know what is. Never seems to cross our minds that there is something beyond our grasp to hold on to our children, to guard our own souls against the wiles of the devil in the age that we live in. We feel no threat or worry about us, and we're not, generally speaking, I'm not talking about you specifically. Okay, I'm just talking in general terms of the Church of North America. Don't get offended yet. You can save that for later. I'm just saying we're not even worried. We're not calling on God to deliver us, to rescue us. We're not even sure that He could. He's not really big enough. Do you not realize how strong the Philistines are and how strong the culture is? And all we do is sit humph and we decide, well, it's so bad that obviously the Lord's going to return in about 15 minutes, so there's no point in doing anything at all. You might as well put your feet up and eat candy because there's nothing that's going to happen to change anything. And we just sit back. For those of you who are waiting for the rapture to happen, that's all the more reason to sit back because you've got no worries in your mind at all. Jab, jab, stab, stab, twist the knife. Never mind. We won't go there. I'm just going to divide what I want to say this morning before I start on a rant and sound completely like a lunatic. I want to just divide what I want to say into two parts. This is just to give you some idea, make you think that I actually am organized in some way, as I said last time. We're going to look now at the way Samson was raised, and then we're going to stop there, and we're now going to look at that's how he was raised. That's one thing, but how did he actually live? Now, we mentioned this last time we were together. How was he raised? And you know, if you were here, that he was raised as a Nazirite. And we'll just talk a little bit more about what that means and what that looks like and how that pans out. Judges 13, beginning at verse 3, the angel of the Lord. By the way, that's a Christophany. This is Christ himself. We will not get into all the semantics of that, but there are times in the Old Testament Christ appears to his people, and this is one of those times. I'm not here to fill that out for you, and if you want to study that, it's an interesting thing in itself. The angel of the Lord appeared to the woman and said to her, "Behold, you are barren, and have not borne children, but you shall conceive and bear a son." You see what I'm saying? This is God now taking the initiative to Israel. They've not called for this to happen. God said, if I don't do something, Israel is going to be completely swallowed up, if you will. And so now he is responding. Therefore, be careful and drink no wine or strong drink, and eat nothing unclean, for behold, you shall conceive and bear a son. No razor shall come upon his head, for the child shall be a Nazirite to God from the womb, and he shall begin to save Israel from the hand of the Philistines. He's going to be a Nazirite. Now, on the surface, that sounds rather odd thing. Just a reminder, we talked about this last time we were together. A Nazirite is not the same as being a Nazarene. Being a Nazarene means you come from a geographic location called Nazareth. Jesus was a Nazarene because he was raised in Nazareth. He's not born there, but he's raised there. And a Nazirite is an Old Testament concept, a vow that you would take from Numbers chapter 6, and we looked at that, and we saw in Numbers 6, last time we were together, is it number 6? Yes, it is. That you will find that there are 3 parts to that vow. There is the part that you are to touch no strong drink, nothing from the vine, no grapes, no raisins, nothing of anything, no vinegar, anything that's turned or fermented or anything like that. You are to not cut your hair. The third part of that vow is you are to have no contact with a dead body. So there's 3 places you should never go if you are a Nazirite. Pretty straightforward. You're never going to go to a vineyard, to a bar. You're never going to go to a barber, and you're never going to go to a cemetery. That's pretty much basically how your life is lived. Seems really quirky on the surface. What in the world would you do that to mean anything at all? Israel is about to be swallowed up by the Philistines. Israel is about to disappear, and God says, I've got a solution. We'll send a Nazirite. What? Here's this guy with long hair who has this weird diet and who can't go to funerals, and what is that supposed to do for anybody? I mean, what is going on? This So on the surface, it doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense to really solve the problem of people being assimilated into the world. Well, in fact, these are just representative of everything the way that Samson was to be, and everything that Israel was not to be. I don't know if you remember that when they went into the promised land, I think in Numbers 13, they came out before they argued about whether or not they would take those giants in the land. They came out, and what did they bring, if you remember? I'm not asking for a verbal response because you'll embarrass yourself if you do. What did they bring out of the promised land when they brought to prove that this land was healthy and exciting and vibrant, that this land was really the place that we should live? What did they bring? Do you remember? Don't answer aloud, you're going to embarrass yourself. They brought a grapevine, a piece of grapevine, and they brought it on a cluster of grapes on 2 poles because it was so massive. Why did they bring grapes? Because they were bringing something that to the Israelite people represented all the vast glory that this land would have. If you could grow grapes this big, if you could have this, you could have everything that comes along because of that. It represented all the glories of the promised land. That's why the phrase flowing with milk and honey is used so frequently. If you're flowing with milk, clearly you have tremendous pastures, your cows are fat and happy, your goats are doing great, your yaks or whatever else you're milking are doing wonderful. You have got tremendous agricultural situation if you're flowing with milk. Same with you're flowing with honey. If there's lots of honey, what does that mean? The bees are out. Why are the bees out? There's lots of crops and they're growing and they're just flowing. There's so much that but we're flowing with milk and honey. We've got massive grapes. All of it says to them, look at our bounty that God's given us. So this is part of the vow. Let me ask you something. When you raised your children, or as you were raised, did you raise them in such a mindset that you're not a Philistine? That although you are being raised within the Philistines around us, I'm using that metaphorically speaking, obviously. We're not talking that do we actually have Philistines here. Don't get too confused. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about. We're raising our kids among the Philistines, metaphorically illustrative purposes. And did you teach them that the bounty of this world is there, but it's not ours this world is not our home? Did you teach your children? Did you raise them? It's the way Samson was raised. Were you raised like that? Or were you raised with the mindset that your goal in life is to get the best job you can, to get the biggest salary that you can, so that you can move up the ladder as high as you can, so that you can retire as soon as you can, so that your life counts for everything that you can get out of this world, and it's really got nothing to do with the kingdom of God? Were you raised like a Philistine? Or were you raised like a Nazarite? Did you raise your own children? Did you take them to Disney World? Not because there's anything wrong with going to Disney World, don't misunderstand me. Did you take them to Disney World with the mindset of showing them how glorious this world could be and how much fun you can have sitting on a roller coaster for 2.5 minutes and throwing up afterwards? Because live life to the gusto. That's the way you live. This is how you find joy in life, kids. Let's go on another vacation. Let's go taste the world. There's nothing wrong with doing these kinds of things as a family. Don't hear me wrong. Don't misunderstand me. But it's what you say. Were you teaching your children? Were you taught as a child? Were you taught that all that this world is? That's probably why you're struggling with the assimilation issue. That's probably why it's never dawned on you that you actually have another home and you struggle in yourself to let go of something you were trained to hold on to. The truth of the matter is, we are called to be Nazarites. And we are called to live with separate mindset from all that this world gives us and offers us. Let me ask you something. Did you cut your children's hair? I don't mean literally. Obviously, I would like to think that at some point you did. You probably took photos and videos of the first time they got your hair cut, and you can hear the mom sniffing in the background. It's so precious, and you don't have a clue why, but as a father, you're like, what is going on? He needs a haircut. Well, settle down. That's how it goes. Did you cut your children's hair? Was your hair cut? What am I talking about? This is the only thing that made a Nazarite different to the world, is he looked different. He acted different because of who he was. And you would see a Nazarite, and you would know they were Nazarites because they would have long hair. And just a reminder, I said this last week, Samson's strength had nothing to do with his hair. Whew, why do we get that in our heads? The moment he broke the Nazirite vow was the moment he became ordinary like any other man. His strength was in his vow. Can I tell you that our church's strength, the way that we ride that wave and stay on the top of the game, is in our own willingness to submit to Christ on these levels. Our own willingness to step away from the world and stop being assimilated by the world and commit our lives to Christ. Die to ourselves to stand up and stand out. I don't know if this is an odd illustration. It came to my mind this week as I was thinking this through, and I certainly don't want to hold myself as some example of anything at all. You know, when we were in Bible school, we talked about, when you get to preaching and whatever, there was a little phrase that we were always taught. Thought it was good. When you're preaching, pour yourself into it, but leave yourself out of it. Well, I'm about to break that rule. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. So it just means you don't talk about yourself while you're preaching, but I'm about to do that because this just came to my mind, and I'm not, again, trying to hold myself up as some great example. When our kids were younger, we ended up involved with sports. As you know, they don't really care. The Philistines, pardon me for using that phrase, but just to carry it through, you understand what I mean. The Philistines don't care if you're going to play sports on a Sunday or not. And so they announced to us that the soccer games that our children were involved in are going to take place on Sunday. They came home with their list, and I said, well, sorry guys, but we won't be playing that game. Well, why? What are you, a legalist? My kids didn't say that to me, but, anybody else would. No, I'm not a legalist. I want you as my children, and again, I'm not trying to say, if you didn't do this, you're a horrible parent. I'm just saying what we did, okay? I want you as my children to recognize that there is something more important than soccer. That there should be some time in your life when you admit that, I'm going to bow the knee to Christ and to God. You call yourself believers, my kids have made a profession of faith. You need to act like it. You need to actually say, I'm going to set this aside a day, not because you're a legalist, but because you recognize that God is that important to you, that soccer comes second. And you're going to sacrifice that. Well, I'll tell you what, the people on the soccer team, the other Christians on the soccer team, who heard that my kids weren't playing soccer, thought we were mental cases. And I was a little disappointed that we were the only Christians who were willing to let our kids' hair grow long, if you'll understand my metaphor. We're not going to snip their hair. They're going to be different. They're going to stand out. You're going to look a little weird. My kids are like, what? You might as well make me wear a dress to school. Like, this is awful. I can't, no way. No, this is what we're doing. It was hard decision in some ways, but we were going to do it. Get this. There was another Christian family on my son's soccer team. Our oldest son was very good at soccer. This guy was amazing at soccer. And the two of them together on the same team made our team a killer team. This is by God's grace alone, and taught my son an amazing lesson. So when this other family saw the list, we didn't know this. They went to a different church than us. He also said to his sons, well, we're not playing those games. Well, whenever it came down to the coaches that these two players were not going to be playing on the games on Sunday, guess what happened? No games ever happened on a Sunday. And we didn't do that. I said to our kids, I said, you see what happens when you stand up? I'm like, I'm glad that happened. I mean, it was just you can't manipulate anything. Half the time the Philistines couldn't care less what you're going to do. But you know what? You actually have influence. And I know that's a simple thing and a small thing. Well, let me just ask you this. Did you raise your children to have long hair? I don't mean literally. You understand what I'm saying? Did you always want them to fit in? If it's a crew cuts in style, give them a crew cut. I'm not talking about how they look on the outside. You're not going to dress like an Amish person just because you're a Christian. I'm not talking about looking weird. You understand that? Did you train your children? Were you trained to stand up, to stand out? One of the reasons we don't and we can't is because we've been trained in our culture that all the church is to do is come together on a Sunday and be quiet. I'm not talking about getting radical or political or anything weird. Let me ask you about touching the dead. We talked last week a little bit of how this came to pass. Did anything, contact with the dead had to do with anything to do with any sinful behavior? Death comes from sin. Separation from anything that contaminates you morally, spiritually, physically, whatever the case. Did you raise your children as a Nazirite to be careful what you watch on television? Did you train them that you don't just run off to the theater just because there's a movie theater and you saw the commercial and it looks cool? Did you train your children? Were you trained? Let me just ask you, this is the way Samson was raised. His entire life was all about, Samson, don't touch that. Samson, put down that grape jam. Samson, you can't go there. Samson, wait a second, we can't wait. Samson, wait. It was always his entire life, and he knew he was different. And he knew he went to school, and he had a beard when he was 12 years old or whatever's going on. And all the other kids are clipping off their little 2 whiskery hairs, and this kid's and he's looking like, and what's going on with Samson? What are his parents not dealing with that about? And this kid knew he was different, and he was raised so. This is part of the interesting twist about Samson's life. When Manoah comes to hear that they're going to have a child, he wants to find out from the angel of the Lord a little more information. The angel of the Lord appears to Manoah's wife, which we never find out her name, and she comes to her husband and tells him, and now he says, well, what? Secondhand information. I'd like to hear this myself. And he prays that the angel of the Lord would return and tell him. Manoah arose and went after his wife and came to the man and said, are you the man who spoke to this woman? He said, I am. Manoah said, here's the question that's burning on my mind. I heard what my wife had to say. I'm filling in the blanks here, by the way. Don't keep reading because this doesn't make sense if you do. I'm trying to work out, what did you mean by all this, a Nazirite? What is that about? Manoah said, Manoah said, now when your words come true, what is to be the child's manner of life? Get this. And what is his mission? And the angel of the Lord said to Manoah, he was asking 2 questions. What's his manner of life? And what's his mission? The angel of the Lord said to Manoah, of all that I said to the woman, let her be careful. She may not eat anything that comes from the vine, or neither let her drink wine or strong drink or anything unclean. All that I command her, let her observe. What happened to the other part of the question? He answered, what is the manner of the child's life? He told him he's to be a Nazirite. What happened to what is his mission? He wants to know, why am I doing this? What is the deal with this? My kid's going to struggle his whole life. He's going to stand out. He's going to be picked on. He's going to just be nothing but heartache and trouble and struggle. And the Philistines are all around us. And you want us to raise this weirdo? And why? And do you know what the answer is? Silence. Can I just tell you something? We don't know half the time why we're doing what we do. We just know what we're supposed to do. We don't know what the end result is. We don't know what the goal is. We don't know why we're raising our kids this way half the time. But this is the goal of our lives, to be separate from the world. Samson was raised in this manner. Let me just quickly point out to you his response to this lifestyle that he was given, the way that he lived. He was raised as a Nazirite. Just quick verse about his birth. A woman bore a son, called his name Samson. It was not a requirement. That's just what she chose. The young man grew, and the Lord blessed him. That's all we know of his growing years. The Spirit of the Lord, this strange little verse, the Spirit of the Lord began to stir him. Mahanadan between Zorah and Eshtaol. What does that mean? The Spirit of the Lord began to stir him. What is going on, Samson? We don't know. We just know that Samson knows that something's different. And now the very next verse, chapter 14, Samson went down to Timnah. On the heels of, and the Spirit of the Lord began to stir him, Samson went down to Timnah. It's like a black and white. It's like wait a second, this is wrong. The Spirit of the Lord began to stir him, and now Samson, Timnah is in a Philistine city. Samson goes down to Timnah. Why are you doing that, Samson? He saw one of the daughters of the Philistines. Why are you looking at them, Samson? Then he came and told his father and mother, why are you doing this, Samson? I saw one of the daughters of the Philistines at Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife. That's a command. This breaks all protocol. The way that a marriage was arranged was exactly that. Parents would decide, and this was totally and utterly, absolutely, completely against the law of God. Deuteronomy 7, verses 2 and 3, when the Lord your God gives them over to you, that's the enemies, and you defeat them, you must devote them to complete destruction. You shall make no covenant with them, and show no mercy to them. You shall not intermarry with them, giving your daughters to their sons, or taking their daughters for your sons. For they would turn away your sons from following me to serve other gods. Samson, what are you doing? Why are you breaking the law? And ultimately, obviously, breaking his parents' heart. His father and mother said to him, is there not a woman among the daughters of your relatives, or among all our people, that you must go and take a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines? That's an insult, by the way. That is the apex of a reminder to all the Jewish people. They are pagans. But Samson said to his father, get her for me. for she is right in my eyes. Were you raised like that? Forget what God's rules are. Were you raised like that? I know I'm supposed to be a Nazirite, but I just saw something that I want. I just realized that I want to be, when I grow up, I know, it just dawned on me that I know what I'm going to do with all of my money, and I see it, And you've decided what you wanted. Were you raised like that? Is that how you lived? Get her for me, she is right in my eyes. That's interesting for two reasons, just to point this out to you. That you aren't nodding off already. But there's two things. Not only does it say in Judges that everyone did what was right in his own eyes, and so this is underlined, but what is the thing at the end of Samson's life that happens to him when he gets captured by the Philistines? Do you remember that little part? Isn't that intriguing? The very first problem that he has is with his eyes. And the solution that the Philistines have for him, to take them out. And that is the point when Samson reaches the bottom and suddenly becomes useful for God. And all that we're watching in Samson's life is him raised one way, and he knows all these things in his head, but the truth of the matter is, it is external religion to Samson. It is external religion to Samson. And the truth of the matter is, he's never died to himself. He's never truly said, I will actually live like a Nazirite in my heart. Let me give you a silly illustration of this. I'm going to ask you a trick question. Don't answer this trick question out loud because you'll embarrass yourself. Here's the question. There are two dogs. They see a cat walk by. One of the dogs decides to chase the cat. How many dogs are left? No, before you answer, let me hear it again. It's a trick question. There are two dogs. A cat walks by. One of them decides to chase the cat. How many dogs are left? I know some of you are thinking 0. If one runs, they're both going to run. That's not what I said. The answer is 0. I know I'm splitting hairs and it sounds pretty quirky, but that is the answer to my trick question. Let me say it again. There are two dogs. One of them sees a cat run by. One of them decides to chase the cat. How many dogs are left? Because deciding and chasing are actually two different things. I know you think I'm splitting hairs, but I've actually decided I'm going to have lunch today, but I haven't had it. I've actually decided that I'm going to go home eventually today, but I haven't gone home. I've actually decided that I'm going to go to the prison tonight to minister with the men amongst our service, but I haven't gone there yet. I'm actually decided that I'm going to bed this evening, but I haven't done any of that. By the Lord's will, all of those things will take place. I've decided all of them, and none of them have happened. Because deciding and doing are two different things. Do you know how many people with their lips and with their attitude and with their actions by showing up in church and carrying some Bible under their hairy armpit have actually given the impression that I have decided to follow Jesus? But there is nothing in their life that gives any evidence that that decision has actually worked into their lives and they're going to now live like a Nazirite. I have decided that I'm going to be a Christian. Well, good for you. Let me now see what that looks like when you now step away from the world that clamors for your attention, that wants everything of you, that wants all of you to follow their thinking, that wants you to kowtow to all that they say, bow to their culture, tell you what to laugh at, ask you what's funny, and you better tell them what's funny. Make sure you do what they say, how to live, what to do, how to have joy in your life. Make sure you step away and show that that decision is real. Let me see you step away with long hair. Let me see you step away and never cut your hair. I don't mean physically, but I mean you stand out, you stand up, you stand strong for the Lord, you stand on truth, you take it on the chin when they persecute you, you prove that you're real because you are standing for Christ. And it costs you something. And you look different and you feel different and you sometimes hate that it happens to you, but it's part of the cross. And you know what that is because you've decided, and we see that in your life. Let me ask you, do you touch dead bodies? Do you care that you do things that contaminate you? Do you chase after holiness? Does that matter to you? Is that just a thing for some saint and some preacher and some guy on the mission field that has to be holy for whatever reason? Or do you actually consider that your life is called to be separate from anything that contaminates your walk with God? Too much TV, too much iPad, too much whatever the case. I need to step away. This is not helping me. The Philistines have got a hold of my heart. I love this world far too much. These things are taking me down. Do you actually chase after holiness? Or is it just to you a decision that you made, but it really doesn't mean a whole lot? Because I can tell you something, by the way that the church's power looks and our lives look, it looks to me like none of us are really doing too well in regards to being a Nazirite. I'm preaching to myself this morning, in case you haven't figured that out. It is our call to be different and to be separate. And a decision means very little without a reality. Judges 14:4, I just want to finish with this interesting little verse, just to kind of bring this together so you feel a little less confused by it. Verse 4 of chapter 14 says this, his father and mother did not know that it was from the Lord. This is in regards to Samson's obviously saying, get her for me. He did not know that it was from the Lord, for he was seeking an opportunity against the Philistines. And then this very clear little picture of what's going on. At that time, the Philistines ruled over Israel. Now, this is insider information. Some people look at this and they say, oh, well, then it was okay that Samson is not okay. It was against the law. They knew it was wrong. They had raised him to be separate, but in his heart, he wanted nothing to do with what he had been raised. Don't your children disappoint you on so many levels sometimes? You do everything right. You've raised them to listen to the truth, to follow after the truth, and you think there's even some veneer of truth, and then they grow up and they do some stupid thing like Samson. But here's the deal. This is insider information. This is the Spirit of God telling us something as readers that Samson's parents did not know. That nothing can thwart the plan of God. That even in the midst of Samson's stupid decision and wrong decision, God's plan for Samson to provoke the Philistines could even be used in the midst of Samson's wrong choice. Nothing could stop God's plan. Samson was going to be used as a Nazirite. It would take all the way until he got to the very bottom, until his eyes were gouged out, until he was finally ready to die to himself. And then his strength came in such a way, he took the Philistines out completely. Let me tell you, sometimes we are so upset with our kids that do such stupid things, but you do not know what the Lord is doing in the midst of even our wayward children. You never know what even the Lord is planning in their lives in some way, in bringing them in what they're doing, the path they're going on, until they're finally going to come to the end of themselves. We should take great comfort in this verse. Even in the midst of all that Samson's doing, God is still at work. He is still the one plotting and planning, and he is going to use Samson. But he's going to wait until Samson's heart is ready, because right now all we've got is a surface Samson. Nazirite on the outside, but not a whole lot on the inside. Is that who you are? Got all the motions and actions, all the talk and all the head knowledge, but there's no sense of reality. Let me ask you to step away from that hypocrisy this morning. Take up the call to truly be a Nazirite. Can you pray with me? Father, we